No, I didn't change my mind. No, I don't owe you anything. But when it comes to having sex against my will, my no falls on deaf ears.
About 50% of all of the assaults on campuses are going to happen in the person's first month of their first semester of college, which is huge. That's insane.
We have to be talking about consent. We have to be talking about sexual assault.
No means no, but like yes can also mean no in 20 minutes. It can fluctuate.
Sexual violence is something that does not belong to one gender or race.
When we don't give young people a basis of knowledge, we're just sort of saying, you need to figure it out on your own. It isn't good enough.
Isn't it more controversial to avoid that question altogether and then put all our kids in a situation so that they're either vulnerable to sexual assault or they're vulnerable to becoming perpetrators? Because the cost, unfortunately, is sexual violence.
I think, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I'm so afraid to talk about the intimate details of my story because I'm afraid of hurting the people who hurt me. Because the thing that happens when you're assaulted or when you're abused is you never actually get to have the conversation after that says, hey, you hurt me. My name is Amy Fortier-Brown. I am a senior political science major. I'm 22 years old. The true one sexual assault that I've experienced happened when I was in high school, and it happened before I even made it into a sex ed class. My middle school, we had abstinence-only education. And when I got into high school, we talked about sexual health, but we primarily talked about how to protect yourself from getting pregnant or STDs, not about consent. I don't remember talking about consent actually until I got to college. It's way too late to talk about it in college. We need to talk about it as soon as people have sexual feelings.
You all know what sperm is?
Yeah, it's the guy's part of a baby, isn't it?
That's right.
But how does it get out from the testicles?
Through tubes here.
From the moment of conception to the instant of death, our lives as sexual beings are endless, constantly evolving.
Okay, when the video's over, you can ask any questions you have, and Miss Davis and I will do our best to answer them, okay? Here we go.
What we often see in classrooms is sort of basic sexual health education covered. So, teachers, if they're teaching in the classroom, they'll talk about condoms, contraception, they'll address abstinence, and they'll often limit it to those things.
Consent didn't really come into play in school. I had one teacher in high school that was like, never have sex until you're married. And the other teacher was like, here's how you use a condom. Here are diseases you could get if you don't. But like, it still wasn't just like, this is what can just happen at a party. It was never just like that, where it's like, if you see the situation, you should step in. It's kind of like you're reading a book and you only get half the pages.
I grew up in Akron, Ohio. The focus was mostly don't have sex until you're married, because it's bad and it'll devalue the whole experience. And when I talked about it with other people, there were people who got really great sex education and they learned about all the different kinds of birth control and about consent.
The challenge is that education is very much a local issue, and so, there are 14,000 school districts across the country, which means how every school district implements sex ed really comes down to, what the school district policies are, who a school administrator might be, and sometimes even comes down to who the educator is in the classroom.
No more sex education for elementary school students. That is the conclusion after a fiery Fremont School Board meeting.
A packed house at the state capitol where lawmakers are debating the future of sex education in Colorado schools. Well, many families say those talks should be reserved for the home.
Community members clashed over a controversial sex education program.
The curriculum in the schools that teaches what? Kids to go out and get freaky?
We have a huge amount of stigma around sexuality in this country. Talking about sex and sexuality openly is something that we still shy away from.
I took sex ed 10 years ago, and I still remember the analogy, the virgin purity and you know, it's still in there. The lesson that sticks most with me is they had a metaphor for sex where they took a couple of students and they had them with these clear cups of water, and they had them take a sip, swish it around in their mouths, spit it back out, and then they had these, you know, cups of kind of gross water. And they, going down the line, they poured the water from one cup into the next, into the next, into the next. And this was a metaphor for, you know, sex, where if you had sex, it was like you had all the dirty germs from everybody who had sex before you. And then at the end of the line, they had somebody with a clear cup of water. The lesson was, you know, if you had to pick somebody, would you want to pick somebody with this clean, clear glass of water or with this dirty, gross glass of water? So it was very much about, I think, virginal purity and how no one will want you if you've had sex. The whole thing is just focused around just say no until you're married.
Abstinence-only programs really are very limited. They often identify relationships in very heteronormative ways. And on top of that, they will perpetuate ideas about gender dynamics and gender roles that often see women as sort of the pious, upholding of virtue and virginity and purity, and men as sort of the aggressor and entitled to sexual behaviors or sexual activity.
God made guys to pursue. They have the pursuit hormone, the testosterone. They have the body part that pursues in lovemaking with their wives. You have estrogen, you have progesterone, you have the body part that receives your husband when you make love. You need to do your job, and that is wait. Wait to be pursued.
The danger in just teaching about abstinence or just teaching about not doing it and not incorporating other things like healthy relationships into it is that it's kind of irresponsible, because it's not that cut and dry.
If you guys found out you were either pregnant or got someone pregnant tomorrow, would you be ready? No. So
nobody's ready for that.
When is the time right? If you don't think that the time is right tomorrow, when is the time right? When you're married?
Abstinence is our number one goal. But if you don't teach the kids the other things, some of those kids, they're going to go out there and do it. You know, and I don't think it's giving them permission to do it, but you want them to make an informed decision.
These 5 keys have to be there when it comes to consent. And the first one is it has to be freely given. Consenting is a choice that you make.
I really think it is in everyone's best interest, not just the kids, but even their parents, for us to approach this type of thing, because when I was growing up, I didn't know how to say no. That's why I ended up 16 and pregnant, because I got in a situation I didn't necessarily know how to get myself out of.
You can see that under that second line, any condom is going to fail 18% of the time. Does that sound very safe? Safer than nothing, but it's not 100% safe.
When we don't provide this information, when we don't give young people a basis of knowledge, we're just sort of saying you need to figure it out on your own, and that just isn't good enough.
College campuses across the country are increasingly in the spotlight.
1 in 5 women sexually assaulted, 1 in 16 men.
The Department of Education named 55 schools under federal investigation for their handling of sexual assault claims.
Farmington has this allure of being really safe, and then the article came out and I was like, holy cow, like I need to do something about this. And so I started a group called Look Us in the Eyes. I have a feeling more people are going to show up, but why don't we get started? We talk a lot in the group about how do we help people get the quote-unquote college street smarts so that they can survive, so that they can make sure they're not assaulted. Because about 50% of all of the assaults on campuses are going to happen in the person's first month of their first semester of college. 50% of them, which is huge, that's insane. And we can stop that, or we can at least mitigate that by A, educating people on what consent is, but B, educating people on how to protect themselves, because unfortunately that's a part of it.
One of the things you said about like consent, like as a whole, is discussed. Like, how did you guys respond to that, like when it was posed to you?
It was never posed to me until college, until very, very recently ever. Like, my idea of consent was like, you're into it, and like everything seems to be going well in the moment, and then you just kind of do it.
Yeah.
Even if I wasn't like super into it, and I was just like, oh, like it's okay, I guess I'll just, you know,
go along with it.
Yeah.
If we're talking about like past experience of like not and like learning about consent through school, I think I was one of the lucky few that had a health teacher that enforced the idea very regularly of you need consent in every step. You need enthusiastic consent, and I think when I heard that other people, when I like came to school and I heard other people didn't get that same kind of information from their health teacher, I was kind of taken aback a little bit.
Who else had a largely abstinence-centered education in public school before college?
I grew up in like Irish Catholic suburbia, so I was not taught anything about consent.
It's hard to talk about because a lot of people feel like it kills the mood, it's unsexy, and I feel like learning how to talk about consent and using protection in a fun, enthusiastic, sexy way, or getting over feeling weird about it, will help change the atmosphere.
All right, guys. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for being here.
I think a lot of people really don't understand the going from a yes to a no during the act. I think that's another thing that needs to be taught, I think, earlier on. If you can kind of like drill that into someone when they're younger, not just like no means no, but like yes can also mean no in 20 minutes. It can fluctuate.
I know dozens of people who have stories about their consent being overridden or violated, their bodies being taken ownership of by people that are not themselves. And the worst part is, I think, the normalcy of that.
One of the things that has made me sad, I think, in my conversations with college students about sex on campus is often they don't even know their reasons for having sex. They'll say things like, oh, it's just what people do in college. A typical story that I got about a sexual encounter at college, whether it was a man or a woman, went something like, we were at a party, we were getting really trashed, we were drinking, and then suddenly we're having sex in someone's room. And consent is, murky at best.
If both parties were both like, I don't really know, like, I feel like that's a really weird gray area that the law and the people don't know. Like, there's just like pieces of your memory missing where you're just like, I don't know, did we have sex? We ended up in the same bed. We woke up, we were both naked. I can't tell. I feel like that is a gray area that you have to talk through with the other person a lot to figure out like what happened.
I think it's a good rule of thumb to not have sex when you're drunk, even if it's completely normal in your relationship too. I've been using this example for people. So I am engaged. I've been in this relationship with Isaac for 6 years. And let's say, and this is strictly hypothetical, we're both really drunk and we both walk home. And we get upstairs and I look at Isaac and say, honey, I want to have sex with you. And if we had sex, would it be consensual? A lot of people are saying yes, when in fact, no. Even though we're in a relationship, even though we've had consensual sex, even though we're both drunk, it does not matter if one party is drunk or both parties are drunk. You cannot have consensual sex. There's not implied consent in a relationship.
Do people seem to get it then, or do they think that's extreme?
Yeah, I don't think people get that one yet.
When you're drunk, you don't forget your name. You forget maybe where you left your keys. If something is deeply ingrained in your mind and your being, you're not gonna forget it so trivially. And I think that if it became something that was just inherently taken more seriously, then I don't care how drunk you get, I don't care how high you are, consent is still consent, and you will not forget that.
I think we haven't figured out yet on college campuses how to do this education. Everyone is all over the map. So often colleges will require all incoming first-year students to take a kind of like HR sort of tutorial online that forces them to click through, you know, yes, I understood this, yes, I know how to do this scenario. And then the other thing that colleges will do is they'll sort of herd all the first-year students into a theater or, you know, into some sort of auditorium, and they bring in usually a comedian or some sort of sex educator who speaks to them for about an hour. And it's often very funny, which is great. You know, or you know, they want to make it fun, except then that's it.
I had one of those seminars when I first came on campus. You know, it was a little sketch and a discussion afterwards. I think that's absolutely the right idea. But I think having one small seminar at the start of the year, your first year, is a easily forgettable thing.
There was already attention to reviewing processes and oversight, but I think the article certainly prompted a much more comprehensive response, and obviously was also a very emotional time for the campus.
People are still mad. Right. People are mad and they feel, I think it's still there, it's just people don't trust.
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing, is gaining trust in the system again.
So welcome again, Claudia and Amy. This is the second time we've met with you at President's Council. Yes. And I'm looking forward to updates and other dialogue on that.
Again, these are just ideas that we have out there, you know, and we are more than willing to sit down and think about other ways, and maybe this isn't the right model, but we are just trying to come up with something for the future.
You have a student advocate position, and this would be a 10-month paid position, and the qualifications would be that it would be a social worker, somebody who understands this and can help to walk you through the process while also facilitating health education. We want a health class. It would be a general education requirement, so people have to take it. They're especially impressed by the fact that the students have asked for it, and not only asked for it, but they asked for it to be mandatory. Like, we want to have to take it.
It's not enough to just to offer it and check the box. It's not enough to say we covered that, 2 years ago. You should have, remembered. For sure, our orientation program is going to be pretty heavily revamped. So I think the way that we incorporate this into that week or beyond that week, really to the first year experience, is going to be different. Required and substantial and retained.
I have a daughter now, and I would want her to get more comprehensive care. I would teach her, I guess, the things that I didn't get taught. First of all, how to say no in stages herself, but also how to recognize in other people body language that says no. If your partner seems uncomfortable, it's okay to stop and say, is this all right?
If we're going to create an understanding for our society about what it means to respect people's boundaries, to respect their dignity, to respect their identities, we have to start from an early age to build a foundation of knowledge across our lifetimes.
If someone is using coercion as a way to get what they want, that's not freely given. If they tell you, if you don't do this, I'm going to do this. Or if you love me, you'll do this. Or if you don't do this with me, then this is what's going to happen. If anything happens like that, that takes away the freeness of your choice, and so that would not be consent.
When we go out and see 5 different counties, middle schools, high schools, and elementary schools, we're not going to tell 6th graders or 5th graders what we're teaching in the high school because they're not ready for that. So it's all age appropriate, and it graduates every year. Just building off of a foundation and getting eventually to the point, hey, let's talk about sex now.
When it comes to sex, you should only do stuff you want to do, not things that you feel you're expected to do. If you feel like you have to do it and there's like a sense of dread, don't do it. That's not consent. You're not agreeing for the right reasons. It has to be something that you feel good about, you're excited about, you're joyful about.
If you're not taught how to say no and that it's okay to change your mind, then you're going to go through with something that could eventually lead to lifelong consequences.
Reversible. It's reversible. Like you said, if you say yes and then you say no, it's no. It doesn't matter what you said first. It only matters what you're saying right here, right now. So you have the option to change your mind, and they have to respect that. If they're not respecting that you said no and they're like, but you said yes, but I'm saying no right now, that's all that matters.
Perhaps when our parents or our grandparents were our age, it just wasn't something that you talked about, but it is now. Sexual violence is something that does not belong to one gender or race, sexuality, any one age group.
Consent isn't just women consenting to sex with men. It's also men consenting to sex with women and men consenting to sex with men, and non-binary people exist too, and we need to address that.
It's complicated for all of us, no matter how old we are. Isn't it more controversial to avoid that question altogether and then put all our kids in a situation so that they're either vulnerable to sexual assault or they're vulnerable to becoming perpetrators? You know, what is the cost of that? Because the cost, unfortunately, is sexual violence.
All right, y'all, we're gonna get started.
No, I didn't change my mind. No, I don't owe you anything. But when it comes to having sex against my will, my no falls on deaf ears.
I got called into the guidance counselor's office where she had me recount the whole thing in detail. She said with a smile, "Boys will be boys."
It's hard to accept that despite how much these individuals have hurt me, I still don't want to hurt them.
We should know these things. We should be being taught these things. We should be comfortable saying no and not feeling ashamed when something happens to us.
There are plenty of sayings that remind us to not think about the past. Every moment wasted looking back keeps us from moving forward. Don't look back, you aren't going that way. But life is made up of yesterdays too. For example, I still focus a lot on 537 yesterdays ago when my boss held me down and attempted to rape me. Other times I think about 536 yesterdays ago when I felt like I wanted to die, and how ever since that day my mind began overflowing with the memories which came out in nightmares and panic attacks. But one day I'm hopeful that I, and anyone else who has been sexually assaulted, will be able to follow all those sayings that talk about never looking back, and will be able to say the yesterdays don't matter so much. Today I am happy, and tomorrow I will be too.